What's up? How you doing? I am David Long, and today we're gonna talk about some spooky stories. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. It looks dark and spooky in here. I don't have the best lighting situation right now. These highlights in my glasses are making my eyes look all white and weird. Sorry about that. Sorry it's so scary in here. It is October, so maybe it's on a Halloween theme. Let's say that. This is Halloween theme Q&A. Anyways, hope everybody's doing well. I know it's been a minute since we've hung out and talked. Yeah, I just been working and working and working. I still, in my spare time, chip away at some YouTube videos, and I got a lot of stuff in the works. But yeah, I've also been spending some time reassessing some things and trying to figure out what my next steps are, as well as trying to figure out exactly how I can get some closure on this integral thing, because I'm still wanting to talk about some of that stuff and fully get it on the record how I feel about it, so I can feel like I can move on. And then if anyone wants to know how I feel about it, they can check to see what I said about it. But yeah, we can talk a little bit about that more. I know you guys posted a lot of questions. So let's see. Rev Charlie, Dwayne Earp. What's up, Rev Charlie, Dwayne Earp? He says he'd like to hear my take on Marxism. Okay, Marxism. He was a student of Hegel. Sometimes I say that I'm the neo-Marxian to Wilber's neo-Hegelian. So Marx was reacting against Hegel. He was a young Hegelian back in the day, and he wanted to turn the dialectic on its head and turn it right side up, meaning he wanted a more materialistic kind of a worldview where it's not coming from ultimate spirit and leading to some kind of highest whatever. It's like the highest potentials of consciousness and spirit are the fruits of evolution, not the roots. Spiral dynamics is a version of dialectical materialism. And basically, Marx is doing a lot of very practical ways of talking about how we can establish a new system together. I would say that I'm not fully on board with Marxism, just like I'm not fully on board with liberalism. John Locke and all these people, I think we need to have a healthy balance between freedom from and freedom to, or positive and negative liberty. And we also need to realize that part of development is that we are, especially in the beginning, products of our development, both nature and nurture. So having a good system in place is really important for development. And if the system itself is entirely exploitative, that's unhealthy. I'm not a fan of capitalism. Obviously, developmentally speaking, in context, for the time that it got going, it was a good thing. It was better than the things that came before. But I think we need some kind of a synthesis. So like this is why Integral 2.0 used to be called the Integral Emergentist Revolutionary Movement. So the emergentist is the more cosmological, materialistic, or realistic type of approach. I'm more neo-Marxian than neo-Hegelian. I also don't think the spirit talk is warranted or valid. Poetically, it makes sense, but if we're going to be taking it literally, it doesn't really stand up. So that's in line with the Marxist theme, but also the Integral Emergentist Revolutionary Movement, right? So I'm an advocate actually for an integral revolutionary movement to birth the integral age. I think part of that is creating this synthesis of the social and agentic themes, the individualistic and communal themes. So I would say I'm neo-Marxian in that I'm more of an emergentist, and I want to carry on that revolutionary project in a non-violent way. It would be good to make that distinction. That's why where it says integral emergentist revolutionary movement, the R is small and the E is big to emphasize evolution. So it's like about growing up. But yeah, I would be in favor of some kind of marketplace revolution and a good decision-making process that's not top-down might makes right or bottom-up mob rule, something that harmonizes democracy and science. Democracy is not equivalent to voting, by the way. Democracy means rule by the people. So I'm good with some kind of an open source decision-making process that takes good ideas from everywhere, but then I want us to test and refine those ideas by rigorous scientific standards, and then we'll go with what proves to be the best. So harmonizing democracy and science and having the system decide as opposed to representatives. I think that representative democracies made sense in the time, but now we actually have technology to where we could participate in a open, transparent, democratic process together where the best ideas would rise to the top. Everything's open to criticism, kind of like an open source science. And I think that we have the tools and the methods to already do this. We got to figure out how to scale it and refine it and apply it in different ways, but we've come a long way with this decision-making process, and I see it as the natural next step. So that is a huge first opening question. What do I think about Marxism? I don't know if that fully answers it, but that's my attempt. I would balance it with some of the liberal themes. Marx actually did that too. The way that he talked about a lot of these things was in terms of freedom. So Marx was a smart guy. Let's see. Matthew, I'm getting to your questions now. Do I see a difference between some of the more mythic pre-rational ideas that Wilber espouses and traditional fundamentalist religious beliefs? And related to that, can you expand on how you understand the pre-trans fallacy and where Wilber gets it wrong? Do I see a difference between some of the more mythical pre-rational ideas that Wilber espouses and traditional fundamentalist religious beliefs? Well, Wilber is clearly way smarter than the average traditional believer. Wilber can actually make all the distinctions that would make him not seem so traditional. The thing that they have in common is that they both exist inside the same worldview. They would have a lot of agreements about the ground of being and that this is all happening in consciousness, and like he would be totally down to have that Buddhist conversation. He would agree with all, if not most, of the traditional ideas. The things that he probably wouldn't agree with are stories about the magic of the Buddha or something like that. I say that, but then on the other hand, it was just on the integral stage. It was interesting because several times, well over 10 times, maybe something like 15 times in that talk, Wilber, he spoke about eros or spirit moving through time. If we speak about it in a scientific way, that it should be called morphogenetic fields.
This great chain has some sort of, well, if we were to describe it in today's physics, it would be some sort of morphogenetic field. That overall morphogenetic field of a great morphogenetic field of some level in that great morphogenetic field, the big morphogenetic field, large morphogenetic field. And it's actually part of this large morphogenetic field. The great morphogenetic field is from the big morphogenetic field. It's really there. I believe that.
Rupert Sheldrake. And he literally said that he believes in paranormal, psychic powers, and these kinds of things.
Meta-analyses of precognition, telepathy, and so on have shown almost 100% certainty that they exist. I think it's really there. That's why all of these psychic events of subtle paranormal phenomena were called paranormal. Normal people don't have precognition or clairvoyance.
So, I mean, I was about to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he wouldn't believe in that stuff, but it actually seems like he believes in that stuff. So, yeah, there might not be much of a difference between Wilber's ideas and the traditional fundamentalist, except for Wilber is way smarter. He has way more knowledge. He's way more well-read.
Pretty soon, I'm going to be coming out with the speed run, review, reply to this video of Wilber on the integral stage. If you haven't had a chance yet to watch it, just go ahead and wait for mine to come out. It will save you 2 hours of meandering, self-congratulatory nonsense.
Where does Wilber get it wrong? He's a conflationist. This is a problem with early versions of integration. People, they have all these different worldviews on the table, but they still favor this one. Wilber comes to the integral project by way of a bunch of Eastern Buddhist idealistic assumptions, which he basically admits. It seems like he's never really questioned any of this stuff. He's never really deconstructed it and been like, but what's the actually most true worldview? The way that Wilber has moved through his understanding of development, if you understand the different phases of Wilber, he describes his early version as classical idealistic romantic or something like this. Basically, he had the traditional green idea where you come from spirit and then you deconstruct and then you go back to source, which is kind of the narrative that you get from Buddha and Buddhism. But then later he kind of changed his mind to the idea that Eros throws itself out. There's a trans. This is where he came up with the pre-trans distinction. Wilber realized the pre-trans distinction thing in terms of the personal line. Like there's a difference between babies and enlightened people. Not so much in terms of the rational line, although he can kind of do that too. But part of the problem is that people are not doing the philosophical projects in the right order. And so they come to the wrong conclusions. So in terms of tetra arising, it's actually not that helpful of a concept. Tetra arising only happens in sentient holons. That's true. So it's good to take into account all four quadrants if you're a sentient or sapient holon trying to figure out what's going on in the world. But if your project is cosmology or ontology or epistemology, you're doing some type of nesting and you're giving extra emphasis to one of the quadrants and valuing the other quadrants in relation to that quadrant. So we actually need to start with epistemology. We have to have a good methodology to get at truth, first and foremost. We have to develop the cognitive line. And then other lines are correlated to the development of the cognitive line, at least up to a particular point. There's places where some lines might be able to run ahead a little bit, but they're going to be limited by the cognitive line. So first, epistemology, then ontology, then cosmology, then identity, and then values and morality. You can't have a good morality, you can't have a good moral system if you don't have a good worldview, because your ideas about what's good is in the light of what's true. So if you don't understand what's true about ontology and cosmology, then that's going to really limit your idea of self and values and what's good. So that's why they say that cognitive development is necessary but not sufficient for moral development. So if we mess up the order of these projects, we're going to come to the wrong conclusions. Just like in logic, if you have a bad premise, you're going to come to a bad conclusion. People want to talk about things like states, which are these ideas out on the branches when they've not established what's true at the roots, and then they start interpreting these experiences in the light of worldviews that they don't even realize that they're looking at it like that through. They think that they have some kind of non-conceptual perspective, but they have concepts about what that non-conceptual perspective is, as if they have intuitive knowing or something like this. It's a whole pre-trans fallacy thing. Let's see what Matthew is saying here. He says, because it is more sophisticated, he frames those beliefs in a way which they can seem more plausible, that there is evidence or philosophical grounding for them. Right, exactly. So it's like, I mean, we see this all the time. These people who believe in spiritual ideas, they'll find academics and scientists believe in these spiritual things, and they're starting from their assumptions and not trying to falsify it, but trying to prove it, trying to make a case for it, trying to get evidence for it, which is not real science. That's pseudoscience. Real science is you try to falsify, you try to prove it wrong to see if it stands up. And that's not what these people are doing. So Wilber breaks his own rules in three different ways. He's qualifying the unqualifiable, he's looking in the wrong quadrant for evidence, and he's committing a pre-trans fallacy. And I explain this and break this down in my What You Talking About, Wilber video, part 3. And in part 2, I talk about why it's important, because if we end up favoring our bias in our personal integration and being like, oh, it's really all about Buddhism, and you take this conflationary style, then you're also going to do that when you apply it to religion, when you systematize at turquoise. And we see that exactly. Wilbur talking about the religion of tomorrow, and it's just Buddhism. It's the great traditions, which are basically the idealistic traditions, conflated into Buddhism. Because the great traditions are easy for him to conflate into his tradition, while things like paganism and these other traditions that he wouldn't consider to be the great traditions don't so nicely and neatly conflate into the thing that he wants it to be. So he has a bias, unhealthy integration. I talk about this too in my Future Faces of Spirit talk on the integral stage. Okay, I remember hearing Wilbur say in a talk, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have a quote, that just by thinking integral thoughts, you can change the world. The individual's thinking integral would change the collective through structures in the lower left quadrant. So just sitting alone in your room reading Ken Wilber book could directly have an influence. It feels good to hear if you are an integral fan, but I'm not sure how grounded in reality that is. Yeah, well, I mean, that's the whole problem with Wilber's project anyways. I mean, I've also heard him say...
It would seem that it doesn't really matter whether we continue to have a role in this play.
In this play?
The humans.
Sure.
Why should we care?
Ooh. Yeah, good one. Good one. So, of course, you want to work to alleviate suffering. And you want to work to alleviate hunger. But on the absolute side, the analogy is if you're in a dream at night and there are thousands of people starving, there are two ways you can stop their hunger. One is in the dream, you can try to feed them all. But the second is you can wake up. And that will end their suffering immediately.
So as you can tell, this is a very bad and dangerous and stupid way of looking at things. Obviously, telling yourself that you're waking up doesn't actually solve anything. It's a very dangerous form of Buddhist bypassing. And This is maybe also why he feels that like he doesn't actually ever have to show up or clean up, that he can just chill in his loft in Denver and write books, and that's actually doing it. But if your ideas aren't grounded in real world practice, they're just hypothetical. Another question, since you no longer see yourself as a part of the Integral movement, which parts of Integral do you consider valuable? What ideas are worth salvaging? Let me put it like this. I think the Integral 2.0 project, like if you understand what the values and the ideas of that thing are, it still makes sense for you to say that you are more of an Integral 2.0 type of integralist than a Wilberian integralist, something like that. That makes sense to me. If people want to identify in that kind of a way, I think that's actually helpful. So I would say that the idea or the meme should still be out there, at least for now. I think the 2.0 project, it's valid. The map is important. It needs upgrades, it needs updates, it needs to be reframed outside of the light of the Buddhist bias. I think a lot of it's good. It's just that the community itself is so toxic. And it's like fighting an uphill battle to try to get it to be right. You tell people in the community, you tell leaders in groups why we actually need to have standards and to have integrity about who we should consider to be integralists and who we should let in our space. And they're just like, there's no official integral anything. It's like we've established nothing. We need to figure out what's the bare minimum. You try to tell leaders in the community, we need to have integral standards and integrity, so that way this thing doesn't just become another green swamp. And they actually get mad at me and kick me out of groups for saying that kind of stuff. They say it's something like it's not integral to not want to include everyone. They have these ideas like, well, everyone's got a partial truth, right? I'm telling Bruce Alderman why I think we should not platform people like Steve McIntosh, somebody who's out here trying to sell the idea that integral evolutionary spirituality should include the idea of belief in a personal God.
And at the heart or the depth of this realm is the spiritual experience of the love of the Creator for each creature. That the love of God is the thrilling experience of being known and cared for as an individual by the source of the universe, is a thrilling confirmation of the faith of those who have a personal relationship with God, this creative being, which has will and love.
This creator God sees me, Jeff, and loves me, Jeff.
That's what the experience of the love of God confirms.
I notice as I'm hearing you talk that there's a little thrill sensation arising in my body, in my psyche, because to see this values gravity towards goodness, truth, and beauty just built into the system, and to see how it's been unfolding, not only in the culture at large, but also in my own life and in history and in the whole history of the cosmos. It's starting to feel like there's not only an intelligence behind it, but also a love, or there's also a loving intelligence or a personality at work here. And I wonder how this view can actually provide the basis of a deep spiritual life and practice that is postmodern, is post-mythic, where the scientific truth of evolution can be the basis for an authentic spiritual path.
Yes, indeed. And I thanks for bringing that up. So we're like the portal that brings the infinite through into the finite. Human consciousness, because of its recognition of these elements of infinity, the beauty, the true, and the good, as that light shines into the phenomenal world, the finite world, we see it as these values. And as our consciousness evolves, as the opening widens, we are able to see presence of the infinite with increasing depth and clarity. And this, in a sense, is sort of the new truth of evolutionary spirituality that's revealed by our understanding of evolution itself.
Wow.
So
cool.
Yeah.
A literal personal God. And he spends a whole amount of time trying to justify this idea in a very lawyerly way because he's a lawyer, even though he dresses up like a priest. He said everyone's true but partial. It's like, yeah, okay, true but partial. Everyone's perspective is true but partial. But there should be standards in terms of who is and isn't in our community. And you need a core of people who are healthy and getting it right. So that way, when new people come in, they can get initiated into the space through some kind of initiation program, and or you have leaders and elders in the community who can help them get it right, help them refine their ideas. But right now what's happening is that it's actually just turning into this green flatland where people can't be criticized and their ideas are treated as if they're all fragile and people get all sensitive and no one can be corrected. And they care more about being nice than they do about actually getting it right. They care more about people's feelings than actually having a good and healthy community. So it's a major problem. And yeah, for a while, it was my plan that this revolutionary integral movement would be born out of integral. But as we've seen through what so many people have experienced, The integral is a poison chalice, as Daniel said when he left integral and started metamodernism. He's like, we need to rebrand. We cannot be associated with these crazy spiritual people.
Start fresh is important for a number of different things. For instance, if I want to affect politics in Sweden, so for instance, I was in Stockholm just the other week and I gave 2 seminars and I was speaking to a political party formed particularly around metamodernist ideas, and people have read Hansi and stuff. But if this thing would take off, let's say they get elected in Stockholm, if people in the press could go to their ideology and link it back to Wilbur, to any of the magical belief, to the things that are going on online right now in that community, or if they could link it to any UFO believers or to the cult thing that happened or to Adidas abuses, it just goes on and on. So they would have a big nasty secret at the heart of what they're doing.
The poison chalice at that point.
Exactly.
Like, this is an unhealthy community with no standards and no leadership, and we need a fresh start. As a person who has been making integral videos and teaching a lot of people about integral and bringing people into the integral community, I'm embarrassed to be associated with this community. I'm embarrassed that when they come into this community that they find who and what they find saying what they do. So it's a super toxic, unhealthy community. There are a smaller percentage of people who are my real peers than are actually just green postmodernists on steroids. Even Don Beck said this. Don Beck also left the community. There's a whole list of people who have left the community. How would you describe your vocation? Well, for a while I said I was an integral philosopher. I guess now I own a business, a video production company business. I'm a co-owner of it. So I guess I would say I do video production, but I'm also a YouTube philosopher. Hopefully, I'll be able to start this Marxist-inspired kind of revolutionary movement, the integral emergentist revolutionary movement, repackaged as something without the word integral in it. Yeah, got to rebrand. But yeah, maybe founder of this revolutionary movement once we get it up and going. I have a lot of work to do before I'm really going to be able to have that going. But I'm learning a lot in the meantime. And yeah, I'm a very practical philosopher, very interested in how these ideas can actually help the world. All right, Sal has a question. She wants to know what I think about the difference between green and turquoise when it comes to the understanding of the following. Acceptance is 1, unity with the universe is 2, living a life of minimum action, seeming like being passive towards life, and the distinction between when to act and when not to act. The difference in reasons behind the above and the difference in the context of their reasons. This is a great question which really ties into what we were talking about before about the difference between more traditional blue and green concepts of enlightenment versus some actually healthy turquoise stuff. So the idea of acceptance and unity with the universe, action and non-action without attachment, it might seem passive, but it's actually engaged, and the reasons behind and above the differences in context. I think this is a major issue. Philosopher means what for you? I would just go with the most vague definition. Philosophia, a lover of wisdom. Anybody can be a philosopher. Anybody can be a lover of wisdom if they take that on, being a truth seeker, and they put in the work to rigorously study. That's a philosopher. Just like an artist is a person who engages in making art at whatever level. If they are practicing and practically making art, then they're an artist, something like that. So yeah, back to Sal's question, which is a really important one. I think what happens is that often Green's idea about higher stages is still interpreted in a very simplistic and dualistic way, where it's all about the absolute, and it just becomes bypassing. So acceptance is just bypassing. Well, I accept, I don't judge, I don't get involved. Their idea of unity with the universe is like, it's all good, it's all just the universe unfolding, it's all just the universe in flux. Living with the minimum amount of action, seeming like being passive towards life, and the distinction between when to act and when not to act, right? So if you are actually at turquoise versus green, green is in this kind of absolute sense, if they're coming from this sort of Buddhist type perspective and they're taking this kind of perspective on awakening and whatnot and unity and all this, it's very simplistically absolute reductionism. It's bypassing the universe is fine just how it is. I don't need to act. Whereas turquoise understands reasonable expectations because we have a good map, we understand development. Like, for example, I have unfriended basically all the traditional people off my Facebook. To me, arguing with them is a waste of time. It's not to say that they can't be moved or that it wouldn't do any good or something, but a lot of the time, it's a waste of time. And they say on average, if you're working on it, it takes 5 years to move through a stage of development. If you're working on it, which most people are not. So if they're at blue, and I'm up here at yellow or turquoise, That's going to be orange, green, yellow, turquoise. That means it's going to take 20 years for them to understand where I'm coming from. So reasonable expectations. If I'm at a dinner party with one of these people, or if I'm hanging out with them, how much should I actually try to engage with them? How much do I need to try to influence them on these points? Like maybe I could plant seeds, I could say something small, maybe I can recognize kind of their point in process at the stage. Are they new to the stage? Are they stagnant in the stage? Are they late in the stage? Exit the stage. Maybe I can do something in there. But for the most part, you have to understand what kind of an impact you can make and what's actually reasonable and what's not reasonable. Also, there are tons of people at orange and green who can engage with this person at blue, way more than there are people who are at integral stages who can engage with people at orange and green, right? So for someone like me, it's actually more important that I focus on the stage right below me and maybe right below that in terms of being able to help them grow. In fact, I think in general, we should be focused on the previous stage to our development. This is why most of the content that I make is actually pointed towards early integration, teaching people early integral stages and challenging people at early integral stages to have a more healthy integration, to wring out their bias from their integration and get to something with more clear, overarching, fair standards. So that way they can actually reliably be in this transrational, transpersonal approach to development. So the action and non-action without attachment to outcome, that's more associated with third tier. But I'm saying like at these higher levels of development, you're still engaged. You're engaged to the extent that you understand is skillful to be engaged. And anything beyond that, you accept it, you let it go, because what can I do about it? So this realization of unity with the universe isn't just like, oh, the universe is doing it, the universe is doing its work. It's realizing I am the universe in this moment, in this place, and I have somewhat of a responsibility to represent the perspective of the universe from my perspective to help other people around me grow. On the other hand, I need to be realistic and skillful about the use of my energy to achieve the greatest depth for the greatest span, right? So that means ignoring and letting a lot of shit go because you need to be focused in terms of your application. That's skillful. And at the end of the day, what can you really do? We're on a rock hurtling through space. The sun is going to go out. We're on a collision course with the Andromeda galaxy. On the other hand, there are people suffering right now, and we can make people's lives better with our actions. So we must engage. We must do what we can to help. So that's that non-dual kind of paradox, the realization of absolute unity, but also the relative conditions and what's skillful for us as unique selves in this context. So the difference is that green tends to be simplistic and absolutistic and reductionist and bypassing and have this very like magical, simplistic kind of view of acceptance and unity and what kind of actions they need to be taking and all that kind of stuff. Whereas someone at turquoise has a lot more perspective in terms of what's going to be skillful and practical and useful. And they're not just not engaging, they're engaging skillfully from a big picture perspective with a whole bunch of distinctions in mind. I think I'm speed running these things, but I'm also giving kind of long answers. Okay, would you consider reading Ettinger's transpersonal psychology theory that ties art to eros, to compassion and individuality? She calls it severalties. Would you consider an OnlyFans to expand your audience? Just playing. Is anybody interested in that? Does someone want to see my OnlyFans? Let me know in the comments. I'm trying to get this business going, but maybe I'll be stripping on the weekends, Get that extra buck. Maybe I'd go to college, put me through college on that. I've recently thought about making one myself, unemployed. Do what you gotta do, man. Bring a bucket and a mop. I don't know what to tell you. Would I consider reading this person's transpersonal psychology theory? I would rather it be in an audiobook. How long is it? I would consider reading it. Yeah, I would consider reading it. How about that as an answer? Okay, let's see. Posted the above comments in your Leaving Integral video. I think it's a question suggesting that I've never really considered before, but I think it deserves serious contemplation, even though in a way it seems to 100% pull the rug out from what seem to be the assumptions of your entire initiative, and Ken Wilber too. Maybe it's a matter of including this rather than an either-or scenario. Okay, let's see. He says, if you take a macro view of vertical development, a macro view, okay? In general, a relatively small percentage of humans are at higher stages compared to those currently stuck in conventional stages. Of those, some, but not all, feel compelled to find the others, combined with trends and decentralization. I guess I just envision individuals coalescing and cohering around meaningful projects on an as-need basis, depending on the need project. The right individuals with the right levels of vertical development, maturity, perspective, and the right levels of horizontal development, knowledge, skills, etc., at the right time with the zeitgeist, versus subscribing to a single community philosophy that is expected to do everything for everyone all the time. Okay, well, I would say subscribing to a single philosophy or community that is expected to do everything for everyone all the time is kind of a straw man. I don't think anyone was ever claiming that was a thing. And also this idea that things will just coalesce and cohere around meaningful projects on an as-needed basis. That's kind of going back to this idea of like, just let go and the universe will take care of stuff. That's not really how shit works, unfortunately. You actually have to put things together and make them good and come up with good standards. And this goes back to the idea of Marxism, too. This was an issue in Marxism as well. Some Marxists thought that this revolution of the bourgeoisie and communism and all this stuff wasn't inevitable. But it really takes individuals putting in the work and doing it right to make shit happen. Stuff doesn't just coalesce the way that the right individuals get together with the right whatever. It's probably because somebody who knew what he was looking for or what she was looking for came up with good standards to find those good people and came up with a plan to actually figure out how to make shit happen. And it was organized and there was some kind of a governance system or practice or something. Things don't just come together. Sometimes they do, but not consistently, not sustainably, not reliably. The way that things happen is that we have to work to make them happen. And honestly, until people feel like this integral project to birth the integral age is something that they want to do and someone builds a structure for it, it's not just going to happen. Like the reason that a lot of people gathered around me is because they want the shit to happen, but they don't know how to do it themselves or organize it. And here's a guy who says that he's going to try. And so they're just like, yay, you do it. Everybody's kind of waiting for integral Jesus to come and save us, you know, instead of stepping up to be that integral Jesus who comes to save us, which is the thing that we should be doing. We need to get over this magical thinking of it's all just going to work itself out. That's not how shit works. Humanity could be doomed. We could actually be already too far gone. And this very passive, like, well, it's all just going to work itself out kind of attitude is actually really unhelpful. And it's superstitious. It's not realistic. So the integral community is a type of project. There's a right and wrong way to do it. It means something to be integral and to be an integral peer. And to create an integral revolutionary movement is a type of project. And it means something to actually be able to have the stuff to pull it off, to have the right people in place, and to know who is and who isn't one of the right people. Discriminating wisdom. For example, I originally just thought we were going to have the integral community of the adequate as the people who would birth this thing. But now I don't. And I changed it, and it was the integral emergentist revolutionary movement. Because what I found out is that there's a big divide in the integral community where a lot of people are not emergentists, but idealists. And so that traditional pre-trans fallacy worldview that's unjustifiable corrupts the whole project. There's a bunch of people in the integral community who see no problem with capitalism or the current system at hand. They'll make apologies for it. Like look at John Mackey in his book, Conscious Capitalism.
Business has always been around, but we hadn't had it organized in a capitalistic system. And that is what's made all the difference. Is we embrace the principles of economic freedom, and generally the intellectuals, they go towards some type of government-controlled system, socialism. I learned that business is the greatest value creator in the world. We create value for customers, for employees, for suppliers, for investors, for little communities that we're part of. Business people are heroic. They're not the bad guys. We're the good guys.
Has business been, or capitalism specifically, been demonized over the years?
Absolutely. It's blamed for all the problems that are in the world, when in fact, capitalism is mostly the solutions to most of the problems in the world. What's wrong in the world is not that there's too much capitalism. The problem in the world is there's not enough of it.
He thinks because he has an integral business that now somehow capitalism is healthy. I'm sorry, dude, it's just one business. Your one business doesn't fix the problems with capitalism. This is an example of where healthy translation blocks transformation, right? So it's like we, humanity, we need a new, better system that governs and manages our resources better and distributes them more evenly. That's a fact. And this guy, John Mackey, thinks that he can have an integral business and now it's all good. It's like, no, actually, your integral business and the thing that you're doing over here that seems like the healthy translation within the context of capitalism has turned you into an apologist for capitalism. And if integralists aren't for making a better system, then you're just apologizing for the system that's actually destroying the planet and probably going to put an end to humanity as we know it. It's the same thing with like Christianity. This guy, Steve McIntosh or whatever, he thinks that he can be an integral Christian. And it's like, no, that's not going to work. You can't just let your healthy translation, your most mature version of Christianity, let's say, block you from deconstructing Christianity. Yeah, his arguments are really weak. Actually, he was one of the first people that I wanted to criticize. When he was first coming out, he was making all of these apologies for capitalism, and it was triggering me hard. Like the guy who came up with holacracy, he's also a libertarian. Integral life sells the self-help thing. And so they're attracting a lot of these people who are rich white dudes, right? And so do they have a problem with capitalism? No. They think that they want integral politics. Like we're going to get like an integral politician. This is the stupidest idea. Healthy translation is blocking good transformation because you're not going to be able to get an integral politician elected. No one's going to vote for him. No one likes him because he's going to piss everyone off because he's saying everybody's wrong. Either that or he's just going to be another one of these middle ground liberal dudes who compromises everything and we don't get to accomplish anything. So it's really ineffective. You can't get him elected, and even if you can't get shit done with him. It doesn't work. We need a whole new system based on integral wisdom, not just some hack into the party system. It's not going to work, not even close. Let the people try in the meantime. Let them try, because what will happen is eventually we'll get the revolutionary movement up to the point where they'll be working on it on the inside, we'll be working on it on the outside, and they'll put pressure on the people from the inside to merge with the system we create on the outside, and it'll be a more peaceful way of collapsing the system into each other with the new upgrades. It could work. I have a note on this called Truly Integral Approach to Politics, Transcending and Including Translation and Transformation. And Don Beck is in the comments of that thing saying that he really likes it. Daniel from Metamodern fame sharing the outline to his first book in the comments. He's super excited by the idea as well. So that one's one I'm really proud of. There was a group of integralists writing a bunch of articles on politics for this Beams and Struts article, and that was my submission. Do we have any other questions before I wrap it up? Let me just give a little bit of summary before I close it down. Talk to you about where I'm at, what's going on with me. I'm working all the time trying to get this business that I got going up and going. I'm hoping that if I can get it somewhat secure enough to work on its own, then I'll be more free to do this kind of stuff. Yo, this is still my plan A. I'm still first and foremost this integral revolutionary movement philosopher, this guy who wants to bring upgrades and make the map better, make our practice better, make our ways of thinking better. Yeah, I have a lot of things that I've been working on the back of my talk with Bruce and Mark. I feel like I have more clarity and perspective to bring around enlightenment as it relates to different lines moving through stages. I did the Stages of Enlightenment video, but now I'm working on a Stages of Enlightenment video that talks about more lines, so you get a little bit more distinctions in that. I've been working on a lot of things, actually. It's been kind of difficult because a lot of these projects that I want to do for you guys are huge projects that take a lot of time and research. And I have to build graphics and do all this thing. I have really high standards for like wanting to do a good job with one of these videos and making sure that it's right and that it's good. So just because you haven't heard from me for a minute, I want you to know that I got a lot of projects in the works and I'm chipping away at them. I'm hoping to get them out sooner rather than later. Matt Siegel challenged me to a debate again not that long ago. That's something that happened. It was really ridiculous and almost embarrassing, the thing that he wanted to debate me on, and his video about it was just like relativism. So I ended up passing on that. I was critical of him in the primacy video that I put out with Layman about the way that he was arguing for goodness when he should have been arguing for truth.
I think that if that were widespread, adopted in a widespread way by people, that it would probably lead to a lot of cultural decay and nihilism and breakdown of civil society.
That's about useful as opposed to true. We're talking about truth, not usefulness.
I think that it's more useful to say that freedom is a reality and that we can participate in the formation of society with one another, help be held accountable for our actions, have legal systems that actually achieve some semblance of justice, and so on. And I think we need a cosmology wherein it's possible to take our own freedoms seriously.
How is this any different than a Christian saying something like, I don't want to live in a world that isn't created by God, where, you know, there's not a divine plan and I'm not going to get to go to heaven? Like, it sounds like wishful thinking. Like, it doesn't sound like you're being like critical and trying to falsify your view. It sounds like you're saying that I want to believe this, so that way I can think about things like this, because I think that that's useful. And that's a different thing than making a claim that you know something is true because you have a rigorous epistemology to try and back up your claims.
I'm trying to justify the possibility of civilized human life. And part of justifying it means is coming up with a scientifically grounded, I hope, cosmological context within which human civilized life makes sense. You know, so it really matters how we describe the universe. And I think the Christian way of describing the universe, based on some denial of death and wish for an afterlife, is not actually conducive to civilized life.
Sure, it's problematic, but how is your view more grounded and true? Not just useful.
Because I think the best account we can give of the scientific evidence that we have accumulated is that the universe is an organic evolutionary process that has aim and value built into it, such that the whole point is the achievement of value. And I think, yes, that's an assertion, but so is the assertion that it's just matter.
I think you're kind of retreating into relativism and creating a flatland here where you're just like, everybody's making assertions. It's like, no, these people over here are qualifying all their terms and like making a nuanced argument that's supported in sound, and you're not. He doubled down on it and was like, no, there is a pragmatic version of epistemology. And I'm like, okay, well, sure, you could use pragmatism to make things true, maybe on a personal level or on a social level, but you can't use pragmatism to prove truths about cosmology or the origins of the universe. It would have been a really dumb debate, so I passed on it. I mean, maybe I should have stomped him, but I don't have the time and energy right now for that. Thanks, David. Listening to you helped me get out of being a Ken Wilber stan. I guess his approach can lead to that. Yeah, a lot of Ken Wilber stans out there. I appreciate you listening, man. I was a Ken Wilber stan for a long time too, so I get it. That's actually how I figured this stuff out myself, is that I started being really critical of it, wondering if it was really true, wanting to convince some of my reasonable friends about it because I knew there was important truths in it. The map is largely good, so I'm trying to rework the map. I'm not just calling bullshit on the project. I think a lot of the distinctions are helpful. AQAL is a great way to get the most holistic perspective. So I think there's a lot to be salvaged from this project. In fact, I worry about metamodernism, the fact that they don't have an explicit map. My project will have an explicit aqual map. It'll be a better emergentist explicit aqual map, but it will be an aqual map. We'll have a map. I just need to think of what the new word is, a new way of framing the thing, a new banner that we can unite under that does the same kind of work that Integral does. Figure out how to start the project fresh. But I'm excited for that because I think we can actually create a new, good community with healthy standards, good leadership. We can build the thing up right and we'll get it going. So stick with me. I'm not going anywhere. I have a bunch more videos to make. I have a bunch of videos still to make about Integral and the Integral community. I still want to share my perspective on this stuff. I still have videos that are unreleased on these things. Yeah, I'm still here. So don't you worry about that. Anyways, it was great hanging out with y'all. It was wonderful spending time with y'all. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I got several pieces to give to y'all. Big up to my Patreons. I love my Patreons. My skills are up and up and up. These next videos that I'm going to be coming out with are going to be even better and better and better. I love y'all. Got several pieces to give to y'all. Several pieces